Most people think you need a 1600 SAT, 15 AP classes, and a Nobel Prize to get into Harvard. But that's not what Harvard actually rewards. Because one of the students I'm about to show you got in with a 1250 SAT. Another got in with a 1470, and another had multiple 3s on AP exams. And yet Harvard said yes. Why? That's what this video is really about. The hidden patterns behind real Harvard acceptances, based on 6 students who actually got in. I'm going to show you what really matters, what absolutely doesn't matter, and the one thing every Harvard admit had, even the ones with average stats. And later in this video, I'm going to open something up for you, a chance to build this exact kind of narrative for yourself with my help. But don't jump ahead, because before we get there, you need to see how these 6 students structured their stories. Let's start with Juan, but pay attention because the thing that got him in has nothing to do with what you think. This is the student who beat Harvard without perfect stats. Juan moved from Venezuela to Boston at age 8. He had a strong academic record, but far from perfect. He wasn't top 1% of his class. His SAT was a 1510 superscore, not 1580 plus. He had multiple 3s on AP exams. So how did he make Harvard say yes? Here's the part most students miss. Juan didn't try to look like a Harvard applicant. He built a story Harvard could only get from him. For almost a year, he did journalism work at the US-Mexico border. Not for resume points, but for real community impact. He created photo essays, videos, published writing, and even brought that work back into his school by building curriculum around it. Inside school, he didn't just join the newspaper. He turned it into a citywide movement, organizing multi-school writing competitions and creative festivals. That's when Harvard sees something different. Not club member, but community builder, storyteller, and a cultural bridge. And his essay, the first draft, was totally wrong. He scrapped it. The final version? A simple, intimate narrative about the small details of his multicultural life. Food, music, and movement, and how they shaped his identity. Not impressive, not flashy, but unforgettable. Another student got in by doing almost the exact opposite. Let's move to Morris, because his story shows a pattern almost no one talks about. This is the student who represented 340,000 people. Morris grew up in Miami in a public high school where the average SAT score is around 900 to 1,000. He had a 5.4 weighted GPA on the Miami-Dade scale, a 1470 SAT, and 34 ACT. Solid but not top 0.1% LE. Here's what changed everything. Morris wasn't trying to build a perfect resume. He was trying to serve his community. He started his civics nonprofit freshman year, and 3 years later, they'd raised over $100,000 and reached more than 4,000 students. Then he became the student advisor to the Miami-Dade School Board, representing over 340,000 students. This wasn't student council president. This was real governance. And his essay tied everything together. Democracy, his family's Cuban immigrant history, and the responsibility he felt to use opportunities his relatives never had. He wasn't selling a persona. He was revealing a mission. But the next student, Rishab, had almost the opposite profile. Yet he still got in. His test scores weren't standout, his activities weren't political, what he had was depth, and a spike Harvard couldn't replicate anywhere else. This is the applicant with an okay ACT who still got in. Rishab's ACT was 34. In his words, it was not that great. His AP scores weren't all 5s. He didn't take every AP his school offered, but he had something more valuable than perfection. He had a spike, classical percussion. He performed with youth fellowships, soloed with orchestras, and joined national performance groups. Here's the twist. His essays didn't flex any of that. One Harvard supplemental was literally about the triangle, the most overlooked percussion instrument, and how its quiet role mirrors small, meaningful parts of everyday life. That's what Harvard wants. Not impressive topics, but impressive meaning. But the next story proves something even more shocking. You can get into Harvard even if your school doesn't offer APs, and even if your English SAT score is in the 600s. Sarah got into Harvard with no APs and no perfect scores. Sarah lives in Palestine. Her school doesn't offer AP or IB. Her TOEFL wasn't standout. Despite that, she got in. So what happened? She built one of the strongest research-driven narratives I've ever seen. Sophomore year, she picked the complex piezoelectricity project. Everyone told her not to do it. She did it anyway. Then she co-authored papers on soft robotics for underwater mining. Then she worked on quantum physics and material science projects. Then she completed a study on stress and epilepsy with the Stanford program. Her essay used chaos theory as a metaphor for her life. Unpredictable, non-linear, and full of small movements that create big change. She showed how she thinks. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for Sia's story. Because she started with an 18 on the ACT and still ended up at Harvard. Sia's first ACT score, an 18. She didn't even know what the test was. She finished only a third of the reading section. And most students at that point would panic. She did it. She studied, retook it, and eventually earned a 34. But again, that wasn't the reason she got it. Her spike was the combination of STEM innovation and entrepreneurship. She attended MIT's insanely selective program, won awards, built a hybrid wind turbine that beat existing market products in cost and efficiency, and got funding for the prototype. She also launched a science publication with 70 plus contributors, ran student government, competed in DECA, and earned national awards. But here's what makes her story important. She openly admits she was tempted to exaggerate her activities, but didn't, and Harvard rewarded her honesty. But if you think any of these stories are shocking, the final one is the biggest twist in this entire video. 1250 SAT, Harvard mandatory testing year, and she still got it. This one will completely shatter the way you think about admissions. Tess grew up in rural New Hampshire, tiny high school, graduating class of 95, and half didn't even go to college. The school was flagged for low SAT scores. Her SAT was a mere 1250. She had to submit it. So how did she get in? Her senior project became state law. She worked with officials to draft a bill updating child welfare statutes. It passed the House, it passed the Senate, and it was signed into law by the governor. She testified repeatedly, she built coalitions, she did real policy work before turning 18. Her essay wasn't a brag, it was vulnerable. Rural life, father's addiction, coming out in a conservative community, and how those experiences pushed her toward protecting children. Harvard didn't admit a score, they admitted a force of nature. So here are the patterns that can be seen in all of these admits. Test scores, not the deciding factor, not even close. Every single student built depth, not randomness. Their essays weren't about impressing, they were about revealing themselves. So here's the real pattern. Harvard chooses people who have clarity, identity, authenticity, and impact, not perfection. Now here's the part you've been waiting for. The part I told you I'd open up early. If you're a student watching this and thinking, I don't have a spike, my activities are okay, but not amazing, my story isn't clear, my essays feel flat, and I don't know what angle Harvard would even see in me, that's exactly what I help students fix. I'm Mati, founder of the Ivy Narrative Method, NYU and Dartmouth Admit, and host of the College Story podcast. I take students with scattered profiles and help them build Harvard-level narratives, activities, and essays. If you want help building the same kind of application breakthrough these 6 students had, I'm opening a limited number of Ivy strategy calls. In this call, we'll identify your hidden spike, restructure your activities into a compelling narrative, find the angles admissions officers would actually notice, and map out your next steps so you immediately become much more competitive. It's open, but I can only take a handful of students per cycle. Click the link below, book your call, and let's turn your background into a Harvard-level story. See you in the next one.